Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 716 with Danielle Rosse. With excitement, allow me to introduce today's guest, Danielle Rosse. Danielle, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Eric, I have to. I feel like right now at the given times, you can't stop. It's just not allowed.
Can't stop.
The world is falling.
I love it. That's what I like to say. So Danielle Rosse was just 22 and recently widowed when she first opened Oceans 234 in 2001. In 2013, she purchased the restaurant to become the sole owner of the establishment. And in 2015, she underwent a massive $1.8 million renovation on the property, elevating the guest experience. In addition to Oceans 234, in 2007, Rosse launched the Whale Raw Bar, a neighborhood New England raw bar in Parkland, Florida. After 6 years of successful business ownership, she sold in 2013. And then you have your latest venture, which is really exciting. I'm sure we'll get into this eventually. Ground Zero Bootcamp, which is a guided online bootcamp that's dedicated to helping restaurants rebuild their businesses. I love it. I really do. I cannot wait to dive into your story, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
I think for me, it's I've always have in my mind, a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So I heard about 10 years ago, it was on the wall of a gym I went to, and it just applies to everything in my life. If I want to get something done, you better put some action steps into play.
What's the first step? I know it takes a lot of steps. What's the first thing we can do to make our goals, our wishes into goals by putting a plan together? What's that first step?
I think it's just deciding and saying, like, you can't look all the way at the end result. You got to say, like, okay, what's number one and then number two, and just keep chipping at it.
Yeah.
And not looking too far ahead.
Yep. I love it. Beautiful. Great way to get this thing started. So where does it make sense to start telling your story? Because it sounds like you kind of, was Oceans 234 your first experience in hospitality, or were you working in the industry before this?
Yeah. So like many people, when I was 15, 16 years old, my first job was in a pizza place, a neighborhood spot. I was a wayward teenager and grew up in Philadelphia. My parents shipped me down to Florida. And at 19 years old, I actually came to work at Oceans 234. But then it wasn't Oceans 234 at the time. It was an old diner that had been there for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
So I started as a waitress and, started from the bottom. So if we were to quote Drake here, right? And
later you were director of operations, right?
Yeah, so I started there as a waitress. I actually met the owner, had just bought the property, met her son. We got married, and 2 days before our 1-year anniversary, he unexpectedly passes away. And I was 21. I just turned 21 years old. And at that time, like I said, the restaurant was just kind of like a diner, but I was pretty much running all the operations for my mother-in-law. But we had started plans to knock down the diner and build a new restaurant, plans with the city. And my mother-in-law said, if you stay with me, I'll keep this property. And she lived up in New Hampshire. She was pretty much retired. I think she was almost 70 at the time. And I just did it. I had no experience. We laugh about it all the time. I had no experience. I really had no idea what I was doing, but knocked down this building and built Oceans. And then in 2012, the end of 2012, I bought it from her to be the sole owner and kind of elevate it from there.
That's because I'm from New Hampshire. We're in New Hampshire. It's a small state.
Oh, yeah. So they're up at, where Lake Winnipesaukee is?
Of course.
Yeah. So they're up in that area.
Okay, cool. So you're 19 years old. You have very little experience managing and operating restaurants.
Yeah.
They purchased this restaurant. What was like the vision at that time? Take us to that point where they purchased this restaurant. You're hired as a server. You fall in love with their son. Take us to that point.
So it's interesting because she had always owned restaurants, but they were always just small little breakfast and lunch places. And, maybe they do a little dinner, but they were pretty much diners. And so when I came in there, she had, a shift lead, but really didn't have any managers. She was a snowbird, so was only down here half the time. And this was a bigger restaurant than she had ever had before. So when I started there, it was just like naturally there was a lot to do. And I had this overwhelming sense of responsibility, like because I was kind of in the inner circle, like if something was going wrong, I needed to handle it. And slowly I just took on all the roles that needed to be handled, and I was pretty much running everything.
What was driving that sense of responsibility? I'm curious. Like reflecting back at like what you're feeling, what was going through your mind. What was driving that?
Yeah, I think I don't know, I've always had this like this overwhelming sense of responsibility. Like if something touches me and it needs to be fixed, like I got to do it.
Mm.
So I think that's just like a trait that I have. I'm sure there's a little bit of ego in there, like, oh, I can fix it, you know. But it certainly, that it was a crazy time back then. We did breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was there 6:30 in the morning. I was a line cook back there because I prefer to work the back of the house than the front of the house. You know, I went from like waitress, and then sometimes I'd work in the back, and it was just nuts. It was really just like a crazy time, but it worked my butt off. Like never took a day off. It was just crazy.
Yeah, this is going back almost 20 years ago now, or over 20 years.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that like I'm thinking of myself in 2000, and that's crazy to think that was 20 years ago. But knowing what you know now, you have 20 years of experience under your belt. Reflecting back
Right.
at that time, painting that picture of who you were and what the restaurant was, what things make you kind of like giggle and laugh as far as the way you did things versus how you do things now?
I mean, Eric, it's just like comical to me that I was 21 years old. By the way, only finished 10th grade in high school, had my GED, have no experience, and literally knocked down an oceanfront restaurant and did new construction and built this restaurant with like no experience or anything. And kind of, was given the keys of the castle, so to speak. I mean, if I handled it, she was like, all right, run with it. And we just had a really amazing relationship. She was a really, really tough operator. So I kind of adopted that from her. And it was crazy. I think that I had a turning point after the first 5 years, and this is 5 years after it became Oceans. Because I was just
When did it become Oceans? What year did it become Oceans?
it was 2002. 2002. Yeah.
2007, 5 years. So just to kind of,
Yeah.
my mind works chronologically. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was working day and night, 7 days a week, the stereotypical, like when you have a restaurant, you have no life. And I heard one day somebody say, you have to work on your business, not in your business. And I honestly think it was David Scott Peters, who,
Okay.
I heard him somewhere say that, and I'll tell you, it changed my life.
Yes, and I should give David a tip of the hat for making this introduction. I actually saw an email he put out, and that's what kind of spun this all out. We love David Scott Peters over here at Restaurant Unstoppable. And so this mentality of working on your business, not in your business, I want to get to that. But first, really paint that picture of, I mean, obviously you did a lot of things right because here you are today, right? You're a success story. Here you are today, killing it. But going back to that time, painting that picture of the 19-year-old you were, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, early in your career, reflecting back at that person, what were some of the hard lessons? Like really get vulnerable, really open up and share some of the things that you learned the hard way.
Yeah. I think the number one thing might be that like I didn't want to fail, right? Like I had clearly felt like I failed my parents at that time. They kicked me out when I was really young. I started there as a waitress because I was like, I'm going to go put myself into school. I actually had gotten my GED when I got that job, so I could go to school at night. So I was like, I'm going to do something, right? And so I think that was kind of driving behind me. Like, I'm not going to be a statistic. They're not going to say like I failed, they were wrong, and just kind of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do something. And then, again, I just have this like drive where if I fixate on something, I don't stop. So,
Love it. That you're unstoppable.
Yeah, I'm unstoppable. Right. Exactly.
So, at what time, so you get this idea. Well, actually, before we get into this idea of working on your business, not in your business, because I want to go through
Yeah.
that evolution. It sounds like this woman, your mother-in-law,
Yeah.
was a huge mentor to you. It looks like she
Yeah.
adopted a lot of her management and leadership skills. So how did she influence you? Looking back at your time with her early on, what was that experience like? What were you learning from her during this time?
You know what? She was just no bullshit. She was like she just didn't she pushed back anything that she didn't accept, right? So which kind of can be an uncomfortable place. Like she didn't care if people liked her or didn't like her. And I just, I knew that's how she wanted things. So if somebody came in and they said this is the price of it, it was always no, that's not the price. It's not good enough. It's got to be a lower price. It's got to be a, and I kind of just morphed into to that trait that she had, just of not accepting something.
Right, standards and having standards and sticking to your guns, sticking to your standards.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
do anything about how to do that, or was it just observation?
It was just observation. Like she used to say, let's say food came out of the kitchen and it was wrong. She used to be like, this is so unfair to the guests that we put this out there.
Mm.
Like she'd always just be like, this is so unfair. And if you really think about that statement, it is unfair. It's unfair that they're paying for an experience and we just gave them shit. Right. So, she would push it back. Not good enough. Sorry, we're on a 20-minute wait. Like not good enough. Do these eggs over.
What's the saying? 3 customers or 50 customers, it doesn't make a difference. It goes out the same
Right.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no bullshit attitude. This mentality of we got to take care of the guests. We got to make it fair. What were you guys doing? Because I'm really curious because you said she was a snowbird. She was only down there for like 5 months of the year or less,
Right.
around that,
Right.
an assumption, I guess.
Yep. Yep. She'd come down like around Thanksgiving and stay till like around Mother's Day. And then she was up north the rest of the year.
Okay, so how were you guys maintaining these standards when she was gone? How did she make sure her presence was there even when she wasn't?
Yeah. So she called like 30 times a day. Like she would call and check in the beginning. And then, I don't know, we just kind of had this like really unique relationship. I remember when we first met and she was in the restaurant, she had been away up north and came down and I was doing like everything in the restaurant. And she turns to me, she's like, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing. And she just yelled at me like, this is wrong and this is wrong. You better fix it, you know? And it was like, okay. And she didn't say like, like, let's sit down and figure out what your job description is or this or that. Like, she was just like, clearly you're in love with my son and we're just going to do this. Like, we're not going to talk about it.
Okay. Any
And
lessons?
she was a screamer. So she was like a yeller, or like if the eggs were wrong, she'd throw the plate back at you. She was tough.
Okay.
So I don't do those things, but
Talking a lot of past tense. I'm just curious. Is she still with us?
she is. She's her and her husband are 87 and 92. Yeah, I just put her on a plane last week to go back up north. So
Cool, cool, cool. So if you could just distill it to one overarching lesson, reflecting on who this woman is, and feel free to say her name, give her a tip of the hat.
oh, Lois, yeah.
Lois, what's the biggest thing that Lois taught you? If you could just distill it down to 1 or 2 things before we move on.
I would have to say just not accepting something that wasn't, to the standard that it needed to be, she just wouldn't accept something that if she wanted something a certain way, like she didn't care if you were mad about it. Like that's how it had to be.
All right, beautiful. So you seek out at this time. Were you working directly with David Scott Peters, or were you just following his content? This is what
Yeah,
you said 2007.
2007-ish. Yeah. I think at the time I started to kind of get involved in like community organizations, the restaurant associations. Up until that point, I had never been involved in any professional organization. And I think I was at the restaurant show or something and heard him speak, or saw something online. And as with when you follow people, you kind of go down the rabbit hole of their content,
Yeah.
and realize that I wasn't doing it right. Like I got a lot of accolades like, oh, Danielle, you work so hard. But who cares if you never can make it to a family birthday party? Like who cares if you can't improve your business because you have yourself on a shift?
Mm.
So I realized like, I don't want to do this. And I have the choice now to define how my life is going to work and how this business is going to work for me. Cause I'm just giving myself a job. I'm not I'm not making my business work for me. I'm working for my business. And it just changed everything.
And so you identified 2017 as the time where you realized you weren't doing it right, that there was a better way to do things.
2007, but yeah.
2007, thank you. So what were the first moves you made? Like what things did you start doing, like to get control, to make your vision not just a dream, but to put a strategy in place, like you said earlier on?
Right. Well, I think this is about the time that like the internet, I feel so old saying that. The internet was a thing, right? So, like you said, I was able to watch content or videos, or I went to like a seminar, and I can't tell you which one it was, but I did started following David Scott Peters stuff. I actually took his class in Arizona and like flew out with a couple of my managers, and that was just such a huge change for us. It was just like the turning point. It was like we need systems and a process and a way for everything we do.
What
And
what does that look like? What did that process of creating process look like?
it was like creating checklists and creating standard operating procedures. I mean, you have to remember, like, we didn't have any of that. We didn't even have like a training manual. And even though I had built this brand new restaurant and opened, we had nothing. Like one of my first jobs was at a Ruby Tuesdays when I first moved to Florida. And I don't mention it because like I worked there for 2 weeks. But when we opened Oceans, the training manual to open was me retyping my Ruby Tuesdays training manual. And I remember it was actually 2 offices down from here. We had like 60 people in a room. I had never spoken to a crowd before. And I get up and just start reading this manual to like all these people in the room. It was crazy. Like, I don't even know how like we opened.
That's awesome.
So those first 2-3 years were a little sketchy.
What you're getting into right now, we already kind of like earlier we're talking about, was it Luis?
Lois.
Lois, thank you. We're talking about Lois, and her way of keeping standards was that constant pressure, that constant do it, like this, that constant here it is. And that's one way to do it. Absolutely, you can do it that way, but the other way is documenting the right way, right? And recreating yourself and your standards on paper. So, and then training your people to say, hey, like, this is the right way, like, and you point to the standards that you created. What was that pivot like for you guys? Like, how did you guys go through that pivot?
Yeah, it was uncomfortable, because this is 2007. We're like at the height with, right before the housing crash, and then that started to happen, and it was more apparent than ever that like we had to do things a different way or we weren't going to survive. We all of a sudden we had a cash flow problem because the housing market crashed down here. I had opened my second restaurant out west. I'd opened the Whale, and like we were in a shopping center, and we were the last tenant left in an entire shopping center. One 2,500 square foot restaurant just sitting there open. The rest of it was closed. And we made it through because we started to implement some of these processes and learned how to create a budget. I'd never had a budget before that. And that to me is everything, is creating that budget and living and dying by it and having that be kind of your roadmap to measure your success.
Where did you go to learn how to budget? Like, what was that process of creating your budgeting look like?
Well, like I said, we had a cash flow problem because my mother-in-law ran things like literally like pen and paper. Like, I don't even know if I ever saw financials when I worked for her. So we didn't do things exactly the way you're supposed to. So when our business had a huge dip and we had a cash flow problem, my sister-in-law came down and she taught me how to do a budget. And she'd been in the corporate world and I remember I was crying. I was like, it is so hard. And I'm explaining like Lois doesn't understand. And she's like, just taking money and we don't have the money. And she turns to me, she's like, stop crying. This is just business. Like, just do the budget, do the numbers, and then you can figure out where your loss is. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was the end of that.
You found out where your loss was. Like, what did you learn?
I learned that we were spending more than we were making, right? Like, if you don't even know what you're making, how do you know what you're allowed to spend? Or, so anyway, we recalibrated the business. And like I said, David Scott Peters, again, learning what our food costs, our prime costs, managing our prime costs, which is our food and labor costs, is everything. and seeing where your losses are.
What were some like one or two things that you did that you changed in your business to better control those prime costs? Like one big thing that you weren't doing, or two big things you weren't doing that you started to do that had a big impact on that bottom line?
Yeah. So recipe costing cards, costing out every single menu item and finding out like where our losses are. For me, I try to find my 10 biggest sellers and just optimize the shit out of them. Can I say shit? Sorry. And optimize them for profit, because those are really driving that bottom line for me. And then for labor, I use templates for labor. And that was game changing, because it's no longer a guessing game.
By templates for labor.
Yeah. So for example, I'm going to oversimplify it, but and I do it a little bit different than some other people, but we know what we're going to do for sales in a 52-week period, right? I've been here for 20 years, so I pretty much know what I'm going to do, and we have big seasonality. So between, if I'm going to do $50,000 in sales to $100,000 in sales, I still need one hostess at the front door, right? And as we go up incrementally, I need more people to handle each position on a schedule. But whether I do 100 grand or I do 20 grand, I still need that one hostess to manage day-to-day operations. So I've created these sales brackets and created schedules for each sales bracket. So the manager, when I say to them, this week is a template 2, they don't have to guess how many servers or hostesses they need on the floor. They go, oh, template 2, let me take it off the shelf. Here's template 2. Oh, it says I need one hostess. Okay, we're good, And that's an oversimplified version. I mean, you still have to monitor a little more than that.
Yeah.
But
I think people that might be listening to this might be like having an anxiety attack right now. Like, I don't have any of that. And I've been in business for 2 years. But the thing is, a lot of this stuff, like these templates, you don't know what you need until you know, right? And it takes it takes time to build these things up, because I mean, you can start today, but just know that like it takes time to know what when you need a template, because you need data, right?
That's right.
So like, just know that like it's never too late. Just start and always continue to work on it. Always try to put these things together, and before you know it, you're gonna be doing exactly what Danielle's talking about here. I love it. Were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say, it took me about like 5 years to go from like when I realized I needed to do something different to the time where I started to get some traction. Like, okay, this is in our DNA. It took a long time. And you have to turn around to people that you work with and say, hey, we're doing things differently now. And they look at you and go like, well, why? It works the way we're used to doing it. It's like changing the rules in the middle of a game. It doesn't feel fair.
Yeah.
So
I love it. So just a real quick heads up, menu engineering, maybe a little bit of a teaser. David Scott Peters is on the show. I'll be sure to link to the episode where we talk about menu engineering. Very powerful. And I know that he's a part of this boot camp that you put together. A little teaser. We'll talk about that later. And I think he's talking about menu engineering in that boot camp. Is he not?
Yeah, actually he is. Yep.
So just throwing a little teaser out there. If you guys are interested in that, we'll let you know how to connect with David later on. So now you're learning, you're slowly evolving, slowly starting to shift from working on your business to from working in your business to working on your business. And we just pointed out that shift isn't like hitting a switch.
Yeah, no.
You slowly got to remove yourself. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be constant, gentle pressure of working on these systems until you can slowly relinquish yourself from those responsibilities. So what did that process of relinquishing yourself from those responsibilities look like?
Yeah, so that was uncomfortable for me, because I went from having like 100% control grip on everything to like, I've got to let somebody else do it. Like, I've got to take off on a Saturday if I ever want to take off on a Saturday. Like, you just have to leave.
That's huge.
And it takes a while to realize like the place is not going to burn down. They might just actually do what they did the day before and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm going right now with Restaurant Unstoppable, because I brought on Casey, and just these things. He's doing a great job, by the way. But these like giving up control, like when you work in your business, like you are your business, and it's hard to go a little bit. So, what things did you start to do differently to cope with that?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I learned was that not everybody does things the way I do them, but to get from point A to point B may be a different path, but if they can just get to point B, we're okay. So, You know, I don't know if it's just like my ego would be like, no, it has to be just like this. And then I had to just be like, okay, they're gonna get there. You know, it's okay if they do it a little bit differently. If that's where how their personality works, you know, it's okay. So that was a really big kind of realization for me.
So I think it was 2007. Or we no, sorry, it was 2007. You opened the Whale Raw Bar. What was going? This is also around the time you started thinking to yourself, "I need to work on my business, not in my business." So
Yeah.
trying to automate, not automate, but create systems, processes, and procedures in Oceans 234. You're also opening your first restaurant from scratch. So
Yeah.
we need to get into
Well,
that.
I think that forced me, like to your point, like that forced me giving up control. So that because I had to. I can't be in two places at once.
Exactly. So you're also doing this just before the recession got bad, right? So in 2007, we didn't know that the housing market was going to be what the housing market was in
Oh
2000,
my God.
right?
Yeah.
And it was, you said it was because of these systems and processes that you created that allowed you to come out the other end, that gave you the budget and to do all these things. Is there any more we can learn from that experience that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think I mean that was it. It was me like kind of digging deep and starting to do things the right way that got us through that because God knows like we were upside down every single way, but the second we just stayed like super hyper focused on like staying on budget, like slowly you pay off a little bit more debt, a little bit of debt, a little bit of debt before you know it, it's paid off, right?
What
Like
were you doing to have the discipline to stay focused, to stay on budget? Were you building any routine into your business or checklist to make sure that you were staying on your budget?
yeah, so I started actually having financials and like two things we do. One is we do a prime cost weekly. So, oh, I didn't mention the biggest thing in this is we started doing inventory weekly.
Okay.
That was the game changer for us is when we started doing inventory weekly, which is so painful, right? At first it's painful. Now it's just part of like what we do because we've been doing it so long. That changes everything because you're monitoring and measuring what you can control and it's just glaring what is wrong immediately.
Mm.
So we do our full financials for prime cost every 7 days. So every 7 days, there's a report that comes out and everybody gets it. And it's not like, oh, I forgot to do it this week. Like it is just what we do every week. And then at the end of the month is running your P&L.
Is it like a time that you block? What are you doing within your business that there's no excuse that on Friday or whenever we decide to do it, like it gets done?
Yeah. So it's inventory on Sunday night
Yep.
and prime cost is out by Wednesday morning.
Okay.
And that's how we measure how we're doing. It's like
And
our report card.
I love how you mentioned that. Like at first, it was like the most horrible, awful thing to
Yeah.
do, but over time, when you continue to show up and do those things, it reminds me of going for a run. Right? At first, it's the most horrible
That's a horrible thing.
thing to do, right? But then after like 3 months of staying consistent and continuing to show up, you're like you get to the point where you wake up, your feet hit the ground, and the next thing you're doing is you're putting your socks and your sneakers on, and before you know it, you're on the trail. You know,
Yep.
because the power of routine, the power of habit, right? Do you
Yeah.
want to reflect on that?
Yeah, so it's so funny you say that because one of my, I read a book. It's called The Slight Edge. It's by Jeff Olson, and it's exactly that. It's your the actions. Every little thing you do every day either leads to your success or your failure. And so every action you have, whether it's hitting snooze, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's eating something correctly, today may not seem like it's making the biggest impact, but you do that compound day after day after day and it leads to your success or your failure if it's positive or negative. And that actually that book was another kind of like big turning point for me.
Yeah, that's a
So it's so funny we like naturally went right there.
yeah. So you had the Raw Bar until 2013, and coincidentally, you also purchased Oceans 234 from your mother-in-law, and now you're a sole proprietor in 2013. So you built up the Raw Bar. Why sell? What was going on there?
Yeah, so well, a couple of things. I had two other small restaurants, like little tiny ones early on in my career, that were great. They were just tiny little guys. And then the Whale we bought, like I said, we were in a shopping center that was completely dead. And our first year, 2007, we had an awesome year. And literally 2008, we were down 50% because like a million reasons. The housing market crashed, the shopping center was dead, the largest $10 million sports bar opened up next door to us. It was like, is this really happening right now? So we went through all that, and we actually like, we're going to make it. And then I started to put together the deal to buy Oceans. And I knew that if I was going to do that, like I needed to be like 100% focused on it. So I kind of put it up on the market thinking like, this is never going to sell. It's a bad time. And it did. Like I had a guy, and I was going to hold on to it if it didn't, but somebody came in and bought it like within 90 days. So I was really kind of fortunate. And I knew I had to like focus 100% on Oceans if I was going to do that project.
What advice do you have on selling a restaurant? Because you had to go through that. And that's something we don't get into a lot.
Yeah.
So we are usually our exit strategy in the restaurant industry is death.
Yeah, that's so true. Right.
Like, how did you're a young woman, you got that you're a business owner, you never sold a restaurant before. Maybe you did with the two other, no?
Yeah, I did actually.
Okay.
Well, the other two I had gone through it before.
So what advice do you have on selling a business? What things do we need to consider if that's our plan?
You've got to make sure your books are in order for starters. Whether they're good books or bad books, it's being able to depict a clear, or show your seller a clear picture of where you're at so that they can kind of have vision as to what they could do with the business is I think super helpful. When you give them kind of piecemeal stuff, or you try to hide, deficiencies, it's, I think the waters get muddied. And even if you're not doing well, if you paint a picture as to where you're not doing well, so they can see how they can do it better, and therefore there's opportunity in it. I think that's super helpful.
What else? I mean, there's one that I know that you've already, like, you mentioned to us, and it's in
right.
And I'll just bring it to the surface.
Yeah, please.
If you sell a business without systems, processes, and procedures, then you're not really selling a business. You're selling, like you got to, like, unless you are being sold with the business, right?
Yep.
Then you're not really selling. Like you got to recreate those systems, process. You need to create a turnkey operation. Basically, is what I'm getting. You can't be, the business cannot be dependent on you if you're selling it, because you're pulling yourself out of it, the one thing that makes it work. So that's
so funny you say that. It's such an interesting conversation. So like bringing up so many things from my past. So there's a local restaurant here, and there had been somebody who operated it for like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was getting ready to retire. And I remember them saying like, oh my goodness, like he is that bar, if he leaves, will all the regulars still come? Right. And I remember having that feeling like he doesn't have a saleable asset because it's centered around him and giving away drinks and this and that. And when he did finally retire, everybody was like, that business is going to fail. It's going to close. And, it had a little dip, but it rebounded. It had been there so long and had such a great reputation. But I remember thinking that like, you don't want to build a business around you, right? You want to let that brand stand on its own. And there's so many buyers that are looking for a place that is established and has those systems in place, because, they just want to run the business of it. They're not in there to create. Not everybody wants to come in and create something from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think that, and I get a little on edge when I hear other people, consultants out there saying, oh, like you need to be able to, build your business up to the point where you can go sit on a beach and run it from a distance. And honestly, like I'm that's not what I want to promote. I want to promote, like, you want to be in your business. You love this industry. You love the work you do, but you need to create a situation that if there's a wedding, you can go to a wedding. If there's a funeral,
right.
God forbid, you can go to a funeral. You don't want to be trapped to your business.
It's like having boundaries.
And your business needs to be an asset. And if you're not in that business, I mean, it has to be an asset without you. And like, that's the way you got to think, but you want to be in your business, right? There's a kind of like, I just want to make sure I'm communicating that, because I just don't like people saying, hey, like go sit on the beach and run your, like, that's not what the future of our industry should look like.
No, you want to be able to sit on a beach when it's time for you to go sit on a beach, right?
Exactly. So, Anything else we can talk about? I mean, what was that transition like, purchasing Oceans 234 from your mother-in-law? Like, what was that passing of the torch looking like?
Yeah, so it's interesting because she said it for years. She's like, "Why don't you buy this place for me?" And I was like, "No, I'm not ready. I can't handle it. Like this is it's a huge operation. Like I don't think I could handle it financially." And then just finally I was like, "All right, I think it's time." We were evolving and changing in a way that we needed to take next steps, and it wasn't something that it was then out of her comfort zone and what she knew, so she wasn't going to invest in that same way. So I approached her, and naturally, like I really didn't have any cash. Like I had to come up with capital, and it was significant. It's not like it was a friendly family sale. It was full market value.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes, I mean, did the selling of the whale raw bar, like, was that strategic in the sense that you were trying to get cash flow to purchase Oceans 234?
Yeah, I just knew, like, if I had 2 restaurants and again, the economy wasn't great, wasn't, like, amazing by then. I just knew if something happened to either one of them, it would take both down.
Mm.
Like, I just was not comfortable having that kind of responsibility for 2 stores, financially all on my shoulders. So I was like, I knew I had to sell the restaurant out west.
So you sold, um, the whale raw bar.
Mhm.
How much, I mean, did you have all the capital you needed to purchase from your mother-in-law, or
No, not at all.
or how'd you?
Yeah, so she did do seller financing, which was, she held some paper for me, which was amazing. And because it's next to impossible to get restaurant financing.
What
It's
is seller financing?
so where I pay her monthly payment. She's the bank, so to speak.
Got you. I think that's great. I would love to see more relationships like that. I think that
Yeah,
we as business owners should be thinking about passing the torch and putting those things in place. I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing.
yeah,
We can build something and let it live through those that we've mentored and brought up, right?
right. And
What
she got the interest on the money, and it was a good deal, and I was able to purchase it.
So what things do we need to consider if we're taking that approach? If we are taking over a business, maybe it's from our parents, maybe it's from a good family friend. Like what things do you need to do to protect yourself and to do that right?
There's so many, right? I think the first thing is just being really super upfront about everything. It's like saying the unsaid, especially when it's family. If you've got kind of the elephant in the room that nobody's addressing, it's going to come out and bite you in the ass. You've got to address everything so everybody's on the same page. Everybody's saying the same thing. There's realistic expectations as to what the outcome is going to be. You're outlining the success of the deal, but also the failure of the deal. Like if this goes wrong, here's how we're all going to be in this together. And instead of like when you do have a problem, instead of going to somebody and saying like, "Oh, I don't know what to do about it," like coming with a solution. Like, "Hey, I can't afford this, but here's how we can outline it." That's what I did with her. It was like, "No, I don't have cash to come buy this restaurant, but here's a solution as to how we could make it work for you and for me." You
What
know,
does that look like?
so it was the seller financing, which worked for her, from a tax perspective, and then she could also gain the interest on that money. And I knew, I knew intimately kind of what her situation was, so I knew this will give you income for X amount of years. Here's the interest that you would make on it. It's a safe bet because we know that it's a tried and true operation. Here's what I'm willing to invest in it, and it was just like a win-win for both of us.
So that was 7 years ago. Are you still making
Yeah.
payments?
Yeah, actually, this is my last year.
Yes, congratulations. You're not quite
I'm
there yet.
done.
I don't want to jinx you, but it's
Yeah.
finish line is inside.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess at this point, I mean, you know yourself better than I know you. What areas do you really shine? If we could spend 10 to 15 minutes talking about whatever you get excited about as far as things that you do in your business to make it successful, where are you an expert? Like, what's your area of expertise?
Um, I have to say that I think that one of the thing that's been kind of like the driving force to success in a lot of areas has just been that like constant evolution, right? Like I'm constantly looking at things saying, how can we do it better? And I'm not afraid to be like, oh, we're doing this really shitty and we've got to redo it. It's just like, I just push back or find, whether it's new technologies, like that has been so huge for us, and finding new technologies to create automations and again, to create those systems.
What were some of the biggest technologies you adopted in your business, reflecting back over the past 7 years since purchasing, that had the biggest impact?
I would say our obviously having a really great POS, but then using that POS like correctly. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but sometimes we use pieces of it, not all of it, to give you the whole picture. We adopted an inventory control software. We use Bev & Co. For all of our beverage inventory. That was, while at first glance it looks expensive, it is so worth every single penny.
But at the same time, I think people they just look at the price tag. But you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, it's a weekly thing that we do, inventory. It's a pain in the ass. It takes all this time. When you start thinking about what's my time worth and the time of my people and what else could they
Yeah.
be doing, I mean, I'm assuming, throw some numbers at us. Like, what was it costing you before to do inventory, just in labor alone?
So it's crazy. Like when I first got the price for it, I was like, um, at the end of the week, it turned, first it starts out like your manager is going to be like, hey, I'll do inventory. And then like 6 months go by and it's like, oh, I need another manager to help me. Oh, I need a bar back to help me. Oh, all of a sudden it's like this big to do. All of a sudden they don't have it done in the morning, right? We all know how this story goes.
Yeah, how long does it typically take?
Oh God, it was like so painful. I don't know why it was so painful.
Like a
And
half
then
hour? How long would it take to actually do inventory? Do you know? Like before?
it would take them like like maybe 3 hours, and then you got to put it in the spreadsheet, and oh, the spreadsheet just crashed, and like it
I
was
don't know
just
how
like,
much. We'll just round. You got 3 people.
yeah,
We'll say at least $30, right?
yeah,
3 times a month or 4 times a month. So
4 times a month.
like the point is, like, that you got to look at that. You got to take that into
Yeah.
account when you're and what's Bevco cost per month? $50? I don't know, but I'm guessing it's.
No, well, I have them come in and do a full inventory.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can use them as the software piece, or you can use them where they actually come in and physically inventory. And it's interesting because to come in and physically inventory, no one can lie about what they're actually counting, because that does happen, whether it's intentional or unintentional. It keeps them accountable for how things are properly stored and rotated. And like, for example, if I have 2 managers counting inventory on a Sunday night, neither of them can now work Monday morning. So if you actually look at an overall schedule, you had another shift to fill, because they were doing it overnight. Like there's just, I mean, we all know trying to make that schedule, it's a thing. So let's say, like you said, labor wise, let's say it was costing you $10,000 a month in extra labor. And then you're over 2 points, 3 points,
Yeah,
if you save 2 points, and it's well worth, that expense.
gotcha.
So it was huge.
I love it. So you mentioned that we got here because you said that the one thing you do really well is you're constantly adapting. You're constantly
Yeah.
evolving, constantly looking for ways to make every little bit better. And it's funny enough, you mentioned the slight edge earlier, but we also mentioned the compound effect, or we did
Yeah.
not mention the compound effect, which I think is the book that came out before the slight edge, right? And I know there's
Yeah.
connected somehow. I think maybe one author like was the mentor to the other off
Yeah.
this compounding effect. Like if you do a bunch of these little things all over the place and you're constantly looking for a half a point or a quarter of a point, but you pick up like all these little points all over the place, they compound over time. And that's what you're doing.
And on the other side, it's like when you see something, you're like, oh, that's just $50 a month. Oh, that's just $25 a month. Oh, we were only off a 0.5%. Like, and when you go the opposite way, all of a sudden it's thousands of dollars at the end of the day. Like, oh, everybody only clocked in a half an hour early today. Okay, well, there's 20 people on this shift. All
Compound.
right, do that math.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it goes both ways.
POS too. You said having a great POS and using all the aspects of the POS. So I'm curious, which POS were you using?
We were using Aloha. Well, we were using, I forget, one that wasn't as popular way back when we first opened. And
Yep.
then we went to Aloha, and more recently we've just adapted to Toast, which has been amazing.
Current sponsor of the show, offering us an incredible deal, by the way.
They're amazing. You can't, there's just no reason to not be using them.
Yeah, with COVID-19, we've had a lot of trouble trying to find sponsors just because everybody's getting super conservative because, and understandably, like I don't blame.
Yeah.
We're doing our first ever CPA sponsorship, which stands for cost per acquisition. So basically, we don't get paid unless you use our links. And I have to say that Toast is probably the only platform out there that I'd be willing to do this deal with right now, just because of this.
Yeah.
You're recommending them organically. Did we talk about this before?
No.
No, we didn't. And
No, we didn't.
why I would do this deal because I believe in Toast. And what are these different aspects of Toast that you said you're using? Because you said that it's not just using a solid POS, but it's leveraging all the aspects. So what aspects of Toast are you leveraging that are really serving you?
Yeah. So the biggest one that I've just adapted since COVID-19 happened is that they've instead of cutting out third party delivery, they've actually integrated with a third party delivery and have a flat fee. So they work with DoorDash. So I get a delivery. I don't have to call a delivery guy. I don't have to worry about that. I looked at this other iPad that comes in on. It's integrated right with Toast. And there's somebody at my door with DoorDash. It's a flat $7. There's no 20%, 30%. And it's just been like totally streamlined. The second thing is now that people can pay on their phones, so they don't have to touch anything. The handhelds. So we have the handhelds that go to the table. I think we're up to like 12 of them now because we're an outdoor restaurant. This is how I see, this is why I got Toast. This is my vision, is that I have a waiter or a server that's on the floor, and all they're doing is going to table to table. Hey, Eric, how are you? My name's Danielle. I'm waiting on you today. What's your drink of choice? You tell me, I ring it in. Let me share with you a little bit about Oceans. And while we're talking, your drink shows up with a runner right in front of you.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that is, I see service with this being, not servers anymore, but people that guide your dining experience with runners bringing the items to you in like real time.
I love
right?
I love it. And think about, I think one thing I love about the handhelds and the tablets is one of the biggest issues in a full service restaurant prior to this was the bottlenecking at the POS. And I don't know, but like I'm a knucklehead. I can't keep something in my head for more than 3 or 4 minutes before I start to forget what it was. And that's where you start making mistakes and like having to keep all that in your head or translate it. Like you're putting it into a technology eventually, right? Why not do it as soon as you get the message and minimize the likelihood for mistakes? And then you're also you're bypassing that whole bottleneck where it takes forever to just get the order in because everybody has to use the same 2 or 3 POSs.
It's so funny you say that. Our number one challenge when we told the servers to go with the handhelds is they still would walk over to the POS and type in it. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And I had one of my servers turn to me one day and he goes, Danielle, for 20 years, I've been waiting on tables and we go to the table, we go to the POS, we go to the kitchen, we walk back to the table. Like these are our steps. I don't know where to go. What do I do? So it's like changing that habit, that habitual habit of going to the POS and pumping it in. The second challenge is when you're at a table, you've got the attention of say 10 people, you're waiting on a 10 top and they're all staring at you and you're plugging in the order. Now, what I like about Toast is that the device doesn't look like a phone. When it looks like a phone, it looks like you're texting and you're ignoring somebody, but their device is a little bigger. And everybody's staring at you and you get nervous that you're not doing it fast enough. So I had one server say, because we had kind of like a round table, what do you like? What don't you like once we adopted it after a month? And one server said, he's like, you've got to kind of block out your insecurity. It was so interesting you put it that way. And just focus on one person and say, I'm taking your order. And if you look at them and punch it in as you look at them, and then turn to the next person and look at them and punch it in, you command the attention of the table and they work at your speed as you're punching it in. And you can sit there and go through every special order, every special request, and it's nice and simple. And like you said, you don't forget, it's in there.
Yeah.
So
I promise this was not meant to be a giant
yeah,
toast.
I'm such a toast
We did not,
ranter because I love it.
this is not scripted. This is not planned. It's just, this is the exact reason why I'm willing to go into a CPA deal with Toast, because I believe in them and I've only heard amazing things. By far,
Yeah.
the most recommended POS on the show. And I need to put this into the conversation. Toast is going to give us $2,500 for every person we lead, we send their way.
Wow.
And because of that support, and because of the state of the industry, we're after taxes, we're going to split that revenue with our listeners. So if you guys are interested,
Wow.
we'll send you a check for $1,000, and we have almost, I think, between $800 and $1,000 worth of incentives Toast is giving us to get people to use our link. So that's $2,000 you guys are going to get back if you use our link. So if you know of anybody who's in the market for a new POS, please let them know about Restaurant Unstoppable. We'll take care of them. And all right, pitch over. Swear to God. Thank you for going there. Was not prompted. Anything else that you bring to the table that I noticed you're really big into events? I was hoping we would talk about private events.
Oh, private events.
I know that must be a huge arm of your business. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. So when we started doing events, it was, oh crap, I don't even know what year it is now, so I'm like forgetting. Maybe 2014. So what would happen is somebody would call and they'd say, "We have a party of 15, of 20, of 25." The hostess would say, "Oh, you've got to talk to a manager, you know," and whoever the MOD was would be the person who ended up with the, you know, the phone request, and they would call them back and handle it. So we had no kind of like SOP for it. And it was like whoever got it was who sold the party. And so what happened was one day I'm at the gym and I get a call and they're like, "There's an event here. It's a wedding. And we don't have anything about it. We don't know anything about it." And I had taken the request and said yes and never had like put it anywhere and had forgotten about it.
Oh no.
Yeah, like this is a wedding. This is like a
Yeah.
life event, right?
Oh my goodness. How'd that
And
go?
I was like, so we're doing, well, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to say like, we're doing something majorly wrong.
Yeah.
And we're getting so many requests. Like we'd find like these slips from the hostess and be like, "Did anybody call this person back?" Like nobody knew. So I hired someone, an event coordinator, and we went from like not tracking those sales, not monitoring it, nothing, to hiring a full-time person. That's all she did. And now we're going to be close to $800,000 in private event sales. And that's all she does is sell events. And we use Triple Seat actually for our software.
I was going to ask, past
Yeah.
Triple C been recommended. Why do you love Triple C? What is Triple C?
Yeah, so Triple Seat is the software management. It's like the CRM for private events. So the good thing is like everybody in my management team can log in and see the BEO for the day. You can get, again, my events manager doesn't have to be at every event because she has a system in place that everybody is communicated what's going on for that day. You can put special menus in there. You can even give access to the servers. Like we have party captains, so they know what they're walking into before the shift and kind of brief themselves. And it's just been a huge part of our business. And oh, by the way, I don't even have a private room. So we're doing all these private event sales and like we don't even have a private room and we're doing it. But you always have downtimes. You always have a Tuesday night that you're not that busy that you can book corporate. You always have, we're seasonal. So in our off season, I'll book you, any night. And that's been a huge component of our business.
Yeah, one thing I love about Triple C is what tends to be a big hurdle or big challenge for events is all the little details, right?
Yeah.
And if there's all this back and forth between, oh, we want to change this menu, oh, we want this color on the table instead of that color, and all the passing back and forth of these documents and making these little amendments, like little things can get lost in the mix.
Yes.
Right? And that little thing could be something huge to the person that you're doing the service for. But what I love about Triple C is that if there's one master document, right? And it's a lot, kind of like Google Docs, right? That make a change to it, it's there. Anybody can make a change to it, and it's one master doc. So has that saved you? Is that
absolutely. It's been so key. I mean, like everybody knows what's going on. You've got no excuses because sometimes they call the night before to give you a head count, yes, you were supposed to give a head count 5 days ahead, but that's not how the real world works. It's not always how it happens. Or last minute they add 20 people. Like chef knows when he goes to prep, let me log in, see if there are any changes. And here's what the BEO is updated to, we use one other thing that's really helpful. Asana, which is a project management software. It's not restaurant exclusive, but that has been another big game changer for our leadership team.
Nice. So get into that a little bit more and how.
Right. Yeah. So Asana is a project management software where you can create like a task, like menu change. Okay, we're going to have a menu change. And then within that, you create all the steps, your plan to execute that menu change. And you can assign every step with a due date. And then you can manage it, right? Because if we start getting into email chains and I emailed the GM and, oh, GM, did you approve the new menu changes? Oh, chef, do you have the menu edits out from the graphic designer? Oh, so-and-so, do you update it on the website? Like these are all the things that happen with a menu change. And when we assign it in Asana, it's sequential. Everybody knows what they're assigned to do. They know what the expectation is to complete it. And I can see if they're doing it within a timeline and I can manage it there. I don't have to be in the restaurant. I don't have to be in their face. I don't have to email them to death, which, gets lost in the other 3,000 emails we got. It's like one place that holds everything. And then the other aspect of it, we use it for employees. So we have every employee in Asana. And let's say they're late, their uniform's wrong. We just make notations under their name. And then at the end of the month, you go, you know what? This person's been written up like that. Maybe they're not severe infractions, but again, they're the daily habits that lead to their success or their failures, right? So all of a sudden you'll say, you know what? So-and-so was late just 5 minutes, but it's been like 15 times this month. You know what I mean? And then you say, all right, it's time for us to sit down and have like a coaching moment with them. And that's been another huge thing that we've adopted that's been really helpful.
I love it. This has been, you're killing it right now with the tools you're sharing with us. And just before we move on from that, just a quick reminder that actually Triple C is another one of our sponsors. I got to remind.
Oh, no way.
It's like, cause so many times I hear people like, oh, like I heard about these things. I'm like, oh, you should have used my links. So I got to remind you guys, please use the links. It really goes a long way with the show. And I just can't thank you enough. So if you're interested in Toast or Triple C, email me with the title of that technology in the email, and I'll be sure that they take care of you. So we got to make time to talk a little bit about COVID-19. So I don't want to talk so much about how you responded and what you did. I want to talk about what you're doing now and what you're planning to do. So real quick, just how did you respond and what did you do to handle this?
Yeah. So the night before we were closing, I was sitting with my Cheney rep and I turned to him and said, I just left Publix. There's no food on the shelves. This is crazy. What the hell's going on? And he turns to me and goes, yeah, that's nuts. Cause I have a warehouse full of food and I have nobody to sell it to. And we kind of looked at each other and I stayed up overnight and coded our website and built out a grocery store. So immediately the next day we were selling groceries and it was amazing for the first 3 weeks. We found something our customers needed that we could provide and we filled that gap.
Did you say you created your website?
Well, I use Bento Box. Do you know Bento Box?
I do know Bento Box, another past sponsor. I'm not planning this. I swear to God, this is not a giant.
So I never really been on the backside of Bento because like I don't really do a whole lot on our site like that. And it was super easy. And I just literally, I mean, I can't believe how many, I had like 200 items up there. It was crazy and just built it out. And it looked amazing because their site's so easy to use.
Because I was going to say, like, I mean, that must be an incredible skill to be able to code and work on your own website.
I say code loosely. It's kind of template based.
But that's the power of a tool like Bento Box, though, because we're not coders. We're restaurateurs. We don't. But that aspect of our business is becoming so significant. It's like having another dining room. On your business. That's
huge.
And if you don't know how to clean that dining room, if you don't know how to move the chairs around in that dining room, if you don't know how to manipulate that dining room, you're screwed. But with the tool like Bento Box, you don't need to necessarily know how to because they make it simple. It's all drag and drop, and you can quote unquote like Danielle code, but you're really just dragging and dropping and clicking. Anybody can do it, and it's
right.
We need to be able to control that aspect of our business. I'm loving this conversation. So get back into it. So you adapted, you started, you turned your restaurant into a marketplace.
Yeah.
What adjustments did you make to your website, or is it worth getting into that? Maybe talking more
Well,
about what you're doing now.
I literally like had to turn off like like I not crashed my website, but like as you saw it, I turned everything off and I realized I was like, maybe I should have taken pictures of what it used to look like because I have no idea how I'm gonna have to put it back. But I did that the other day in like 2 seconds because Bento is so easy to use.
Yeah.
So we self-delivered everything to kind of avoid third-party charges. Plus I had my whole leadership team who I didn't want to let go, and they were like, Danielle, whatever we need to do. So we did grocery. We took all of our delivery charges and our gratuities, and we put them together to give to raise money for our non-working team members. We did that last week. We raised over $20,000.
Awesome.
So it was really really amazing, and it was difficult because you've got, you know, my leadership team's 10 people, and it's like everybody wants to be in charge, and then here we are. We're like, all right, guys, we've got to work together, and some of you have to deliver and some of you have to do fulfillment and some of you have to do the ordering. And it was kind of really strange because it's like building a new business. And then the second part of that is we were fortunate enough to learn about a contract with the school system that we kind of started to go after. And through, I think it's been 4 weeks now, we just served over 40,000 meals to the school system, to 3 different schools where we produce and distribute their breakfast and lunch for those kids that depend on the school system for their meals every day. And
I love it. And I feel like it's worth mentioning, but I feel like where we are with COVID-19, everyone, I don't know if I agree that the world is changing. I don't know if I agree that there's going to be this completely different world when we come back. I think all the things that we're being told to do right now were things that we should have been doing already. And all the things, these quote unquote trends from COVID-19 are just expedited, sped up trends that were already in place. And now you've got to adapt. You've got to incorporate delivery. I mean, but we've already talked about tools on the show that if you are implementing these tools, you're kind of, you're set up to evolve with the industry, right? Like bento box delivery and all these things, toast delivery and all these things. Like these are built into these tools that you've already invested in, and you can just hit a switch and evolve. It's that simple. What are your thoughts on what I just said?
So it's so funny you say adapt, because that's been kind of like my catchphrase all week is like, I didn't pivot. I adapted. Like pivoted would have been like maybe go into a different business. Like I just found what my customers needed for that time and I adapted to their needs. And like you said, this is all stuff that we should have been doing in some capacity, like delivery or stuff online. But it was just highlighted during this time period, you know, because that was the need that our guests had. So I think, like you said, the world isn't going to be any different, but we're going to adapt to the changing needs that our guests have, because their needs have come in, they're in different ways now.
It's very coincidental that the thing that the trends that were happening, right, of more people ordering online, more people picking up, more people doing delivery, like all that. But now it's just coincidental that because of COVID-19, it's like that on steroids, right?
Right.
So, and if we want to stay in business, if we want to connect with our guests who might be a little apprehensive of going out, maybe we have I mean, you're in Florida, like you guys, there's a lot of old people in Florida, you know, like you got to serve that market, and they're probably going to be the last ones to come out of hiding.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I don't know. I don't think we need to beat that to death. The reason why I'm really excited to make an example of you specifically in how you responded to COVID is, you know, there's so many people out there that just decided to like bitch and moan and say, this is not fair. Like this is happening to us. And it's not, and I'm not it sucks right now. I don't want to underplay that. It's very significant. I would hate to be in any one of my listeners' shoes or your shoes, having to be a restaurant owner going through COVID-19. But you chose to do something about it. You chose to see the silver lining. What was that silver lining for you?
You know what? It's so interesting, Eric. Like I remember like the first week we started doing grocery and I'm like, I'm tired. This is hard. It was hard work. And we were working more than ever. And our friends are like, I'm sitting at home and I just learned how to do Tai Chi on the internet because we have nothing to do. Like, I was like, I want to go into quarantine. And yesterday was our first day that we were allowed to reopen. And everybody who showed up were people who had ordered it from us for grocery, our regular customers, because we stayed relevant to them, right? And they were all like, oh my God, we saw you were open. We wanted to come support you. Like, the world did not just stop. Like, you had to stay relevant to them. You had to show them like you cared enough to adapt to their needs and you would be there for them. So I think I didn't want to just like go away. You know, I didn't want the blood to stop pumping through the veins of the restaurant, because to start up from scratch would have been like painful. And the other thing is that like the opportunity with the school and some other things that we did, those opportunities happened because we were there, we were open, and we were ready. Like, oh, you need a catering order for the hospital tomorrow? Done. We can do it. You know, if somebody had called me, I'd be like, well, let me see who I can get to come into work, and let me, you know, and every day people would be like, how are you going to pay your people? I'm like, I have no idea. I just know today we have a gig that we can do, that we can pay them for. And tomorrow we'll make that decision again. And, you know, we just sat down as a team and I was like, I have no idea if I can pay you. I have no idea how long this is going to go on for. I just know today, you know, some of you, I'm not going to have to lay off, but tomorrow I might. And we took every day like that.
Yeah. And I think I love that. I love everything you share with us. The other thing that I'm just going to bring straight to the surface is that you spent one of the things I ask a lot of my guests is how, like, the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. You spent the past 20 years transforming as a restaurant owner into the woman you are today, into the restaurateur you are today. And you've been able to not only survive COVID-19, but you're doing really well. Is that safe to say?
Well, we'll see. It's only day one, but yeah, we're open. I'm thriving.
Business is still in business, you know, like that's a lot more than some people can say right now. And you're choosing to share your knowledge with other people because you've been for the past 20 years, the slight of like the compounding effect, right? The slight edge, constantly tweaking, constantly evolving, paying attention to these little things you can do. And now you're able to weather the storm, and now you're helping other people weather the storm. And that's kind of that's how you came across my radar, because you're putting together this restaurant boot camp to come back from COVID-19 stronger than ever before, where you're basically taking people on the journey that you went through as a restaurateur and connecting them with the resources you can with to learn. Is that a good summary of what the boot camp is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I kind of I mean, you really summarized it perfectly. I mean, when we started Ground Zero and kind of came up with the idea, the concept was like, as an independent restaurateur, you don't have a counsel on staff. You don't have an accountant, you know, in your corporate office that can tell you how to navigate, you know, the cash flow right now. You don't have, you know, heads of every department that can really kind of like dig deep for you and do all this research of all these changing everything that's changing right now. And like I said to you before, like when I went through the housing crisis, the one thing that got me through is that I dug deep into my business when the revenues weren't there and came up with the systems and the processes to do things so that I could not just survive that time, but thrive afterwards. And I think we're in that same period of time right now where we need to be doing things to not just survive where we are, but when we get to the other side, because it's going to come, that we can thrive through it and be better operators and better business people at that time. So to me, it was finding some of these people I've worked with, most of them, you know, I know it was like kind of creating your own corporate in-house council of restaurant experts to guide you through this time. And some of the stuff you might know, you have to put a checklist into place, you have to do recipe crossing cards with David Scott Peters, but that doesn't mean you've done it. And sometimes committing to a course holds you accountable to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to invest in myself and my business, because, you know, if I get to decide, I'm going to kill it, you know, because he's doing this.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the other thing too, like in the entrepreneur in you, whenever there's disaster, there's also opportunity. It's a little awkward to be talking about money right now, but the truth is, like, this is a capitalistic economy that we exist in. We become successful by being people of value. And you spent the past 20 years compounding this wisdom and this experience, and you can Sherpa and coach and guide people through these weird times. And that's a person of value. And I don't think there's any shame in trying to create an asset, a tool to share your knowledge and to to benefit and to make money from that too. And I think that's kind
Right.
of the example. Like, we should not be ashamed to mention stuff like that. If we can be a person of value, we should get paid for that. And I think that anybody listening to this right now, like, what value do you bring into the world? Where is your area of expertise, and how can you find a way to monetize that, right? And to
Right.
technology to share that knowledge, or whatever it is that you choose to do, but to think outside the box. And I think that's just another level of why I want to make an example of you, because I think we should all think like this. What are your thoughts on what I just shared?
Yeah, no, I mean, you summed it up perfectly. I mean, we have to invest in ourselves. We have to commit, and sometimes you need something to hold you accountable. And there's lots of free content out there, right? Everything you need to know is on the internet, but you're not going to look it up.
Mhm.
You're not going to, because you're not committing to a process. You're not sitting down and saying, wait, here, I need to dig in deep. And I think that's, for me, it's like, when you have to do that. And you've got to look at when revenues were high, it's like revenue hides all mistakes, right? And you're like, it's not that big of a deal, I'll just kind of let it go. Well, the revenue's not there anymore to hide your mistakes. Your revenue's not there anymore to cover up the things you didn't want to address. You've got to look it straight in the eye and say, I've got to fix this. I've got to do it right.
Yep. I love it. So if we're interested in this boot camp, that you
Yep.
put together, that's that you can access 24/7, right? It's on your
Yep.
own, right?
It's
So
on your own time.
yep. So where's the best place to go to? And I'll link to it in the show notes. This is episode.
Yeah.
Stick around to the closing thoughts. I'll tell you what episode. Calendar is kind of jacked up right now. Just tell us a little bit more how to find it.
Yeah, it's www.groundzerobootcamp.com. You just go on there, sign up. You immediately get an email to log you into the course, and you go at your pace. To me, I would recommend doing one class a day, and they're around 45 minutes. I think that's the sweet spot. Any longer, as a restaurateur, you've got ADD and you're not paying attention, but it's just enough to focus on like one area every day. And these are all areas that I identified that are kind of like make your foundation of your business. And if you just focus on every day one thing that you're going to kind of dig into, and you're going to tweak, by the time you get done these 30 days, I think we've got over 20 speakers now. You've touched all areas of your business and all these things that you can dig in on. And you know what? If you love one of the speakers and it's somebody you want to work with, they're there now at your disposal. You can say, I really connected with, Sandy Corm from the Catering Coach. I really connected with Kathleen Woods. Maybe I need to dig in deeper with her. So it brings, these are amazing consultants in our industry. And Jim Knight, who talks about culture. I mean, it's amazing when you sit there and listen to how he outlines culture in your business. Like, how important is that right now when you're going through these times as a leader to your team? Like, what's the culture that you're adapting to say, like, we're going to all get through this together. So to me, that's kind of been the driving force behind it. Was like, oh, no way. I love him.
You mentioned Jim Knight, who was a past guest in the show, and I was like, wait, I have his book right behind.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Holding up to the camera. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'd be able to see that. But yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to connect with you is because a lot of these experts that you are bringing to this boot camp are a lot of my past guests. So you have good taste. I'll say that. One of the reasons why I wanted to make an example of you and bring you on the show, not only because you're an incredible restaurateur, but I love what you're doing, and I love how you're seeing the silver lining and all this, and we can be people of value, and we should be rewarded for that value, for sure.
Yeah.
So what does it cost? Let's just get there real quick, and then we'll wrap this up and we'll head into the speed round.
Yeah, so it's the course is $5.99, but obviously we've put together a promo code for Restaurant Unstoppable, so it brings it down to half price for $2.99. And it gets you, like I said, we had 20 speakers. I think I'm up to over 22 speakers now. So and I just keep adding people as they come, as I find people that have really significant value. And it's just an amazing way to kind of say, all right, I need to dig deep. I need to focus on different areas of my business. There is so much going on right now. We need something that every day kind of grounds us to say, all right, what are we going to focus on? Because and the people that, here's my number one thing. If you think you're going to reopen your restaurant the way you closed, you're in for a rude awakening, right? It's not a new world. It's just a different world. And you better adapt and change and pay attention to the glaring holes in your foundation that, revenue is hiding before.
Yes. Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I'll be sure to share that promotional code with you in the closing thoughts to get that half off. Do you know what it is? Because I don't.
What do you want it to be?
Let's community unstoppable.
What, you want it to be unstoppable? That's kind of long.
Is it too long? How
No,
about
we can do unstoppable 50.
what about don't stop?
Don't stop. Okay.
Okay, don't. If you use promotional code don't stop, then
I like that. Don't stop.
yeah. If you use promotional code don't stop, you get 50% off. And thank you very much for that generosity, Danielle. I appreciate you supporting the show as well. All these little things
My pleasure.
and help us pay the bills. I got new team members. I just doubled in size. I got KC, our community manager. It's stressful. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little. We're back, and the first question I have for you, Danielle, is what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
I'd say sense of responsibility.
What is your biggest weakness?
My people skills.
You mentioned, and I'll pull back a layer here. You mentioned another recording or video I watched where you kind of just like run through the dining room sometimes. Been called out on that.
Yeah.
So,
somebody said to me, I never say hello to anybody. Like I'm that rude. And I realized like, it's not that I'm thinking about something and I just.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's important to be mindful of your shortcomings. So you can compensate, whether that be just admitting that you're not good at it and letting people know, like, hey, it's not personal. I just suck. Like, I'm dyslexic and like I screw shit up all the time in my emails. And like, I just tell people like, don't expect this to be perfect.
Yeah. I know I'm abrasive, so I really try to pay attention to other people's, needs and feelings.
But it's so important to be mindful. So I just wanted to kind of, commend you for that. What is one thing you do that, it's not like I've done this 700 plus times. What is one question you ask or thing you look for during the interview process?
I would say sense of responsibility. Like when you talk to somebody and they share a story about a previous job and they say like, oh, this happened. And then they give their opinion about it, but they don't share about what they did about it. I'll notice that.
Challenge today.
My biggest challenge today. I mean, this is a bad day to ask, right? In the middle of COVID.
But it's relative.
Can I skip?
We're all in the middle of COVID though. So what your challenge with COVID might be someone else's challenge with COVID.
I'm not challenged with what's happening today, but I know the next 4 to 6 months are going to be where the real challenge is. Being closed was not difficult. Being open with down revenue is difficult.
Yeah. It's going to be rough for sure, but these interviews, your knowledge, shared knowledge, all this will help you guys. I'm confident in that. Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team. So this is a core value, a way to be, a way to act that you teach your team.
Yeah. So our core value, is everything matters. There's not one thing that's more significant or insignificant than the other. Like every action leads, again, clearly I have a common theme here, to the success or failures based on the decisions that we make.
I love it. What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or restaurant owner?
I would say the Slight Edge. All my managers earlier this year, we just read The Culture Solution by Matthew Kelly, and that was amazing. Obviously, David Scott Peters' new book, Restaurant Prosperity Formula, is a must read.
Is Dave's book on audio yet?
I don't think so.
I was going to say, because I mean, that's
it should be, because he needs to read it too.
I need to get on.
Yeah.
I know those first 2 books are on audio, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So if you are not leveraging audiobooks, I highly recommend it. With your schedules being on the go all the time. And the other cool thing about audiobooks is that you can be listening to an audiobook in the morning when you're prepping and bringing your team in and getting everybody listening to the same stuff so you're all on the same page, which I think is one aspect of audiobooks that gets overlooked.
Yeah. You've got to think of how much net time you have. To me, net time is driving in the car, waiting for a doctor, doing cardio when you're working out, prepping. That's a great example of net time.
Exactly. And I skipped a question. Seriously struggling this morning with the speed round. What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So this is something that's common within the four walls of your business, but something that isn't common throughout the industry to go above and beyond.
Yeah. So I think something this year that I've thought of that's kind of unique is empathy,
Mm.
right? So looking at when, so often we'll come back and be like, oh my God, this guest asked for this. They're so annoying. Are they really annoying? Like, put yourself in their shoes and have some empathy for what they're asking for, And oh, by the way, what did they go through today? And then that was just like the icing on the cake. Their steak was overcooked.
Yeah.
So like, imagine that being you.
Yeah. And if what would you say your biggest challenge was being, what's the word you used? Sociable or not sociable? Was that the word?
I'm socially awkward, so there's that.
I was gonna say, like, this is coming from somebody who's socially awkward, giving you an empathy advice. So listen to it. It's she can do it, you can do it. What's one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
um I think budgeting. I think a lot of restaurateurs, there's so much money coming in, that doesn't mean it's all yours.
Mm-hmm. I love it. There's a book out there, in a school of thought out there that I've been preaching this and I've been trying to live it. And now that I have other people on my team, and it's more important than ever that I'm taking care of them. Profit first is a great, are you familiar with that school of thought?
No, I'm writing it down.
All right. The next question I have for you, what is one piece of technology? And I know you've already dropped a bunch of technology.
I know.
But what's maybe something that's new that you've just adopted or something that you're thinking about adopting that has you really excited?
Crap. Yeah, we use so much. We use Toast 7 rooms. All right, here's a good one. So Open Table, had Open Table for years, like $25,000 a year. And I cut Open Table off 3 years ago. And everybody said I'm crazy. I'm in a tourist area. I was like, there's no way I'm going to lose $25,000 worth of business. And that's what I pay to them. So I'd net out the same. And we were up the next year. We've switched to 7 rooms, which is does the same thing like Open Table as far as it managing your back end. Plus they do a whole lot more. So I think that's been really cool.
I know CRM is a huge component of Open Table. Does 7 rooms equate or?
Yeah, better. Yeah, they just adopted a new marketing tool in there, and it's way better as a CRM.
Beautiful. All right, this is the last question. It's a doozy. Actually, I am skipping so many questions. I will get through this interview together. I promise. What is one service you've outsourced to? So this is a new question I'm asking. And the idea is, what I want Restaurant Unstoppable to be is a way to connect good people with good people. So a service that you already mentioned, the Bev service, something like that, but a service that you've outsourced to make yourself and your collective better.
Yeah, so I know exactly what it is, because this is we just have a new company. So we outsourced our bookkeeping and accounting maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We used to have it in-house, one person I managed, and it was so time consuming. We outsourced it, and it's been everything for us. And we just hooked up with the Largo Group and Gannon, and it's just amazing. Like, first of all, it's one less person that's in your 4 walls that's asking of your time every day. Everything's automated, everything's correct. You get full financials, on your schedule, and that has been a game changer.
Okay, and that was the Largo Group?
The Largo Group, and they specialize in restaurants.
Can you spell that for us real quick?
LARGO.
Okay, beautiful. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. Make sure you stick around to the closing thoughts. I'll share what episode number this is for you guys so you can find it easier. And now for the last question. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants will be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Okay, that's not a big one. One thing that we didn't get into today, I talked a little bit about when I had that like epiphany, not to work in my business, on my business, but on, was also getting involved in community, right? So I hadn't done any of that. And that came a little bit after, closer to 2010, but getting involved in your community and giving back has been an integral piece of what I do. So to me, I feel like we all have a responsibility to use our time, our talent, and our resources. And resources is not always money, to give back to our community, and it comes back to you like 10 times over. But that has been a game changer for me.
I like to say people forget business is all about relationships, and money
Yeah.
is a tool to manage relationships. And we forget that behind it all, it's all about relationships. You have to put that at the forefront of everything you do. Those relationships will, if you make it about others, others will make it about you. And,
Yeah.
and it's a very simple. So number one, invest in your community. Number two,
I would say, caring about your team. When I first started and with Lois, my mother-in-law, she was always like, you've got to work 80 hours a week or you're not a manager, right? And I realized that if I don't give them five shifts a week with 2 days off that are in a row, like, they're not going to be the best version of themselves. They're not going to want to contribute the best way to the team. And when we really started focusing on that, we came together as a leadership team. We are no longer a group of managers. And so that has been a huge thing, is really focusing on your team and growing them to be the best version of themselves, and so that they enjoy what they do, and don't try to make them something that they're not. Figure out what they're really good at and make that their responsibility.
how do you summarize that in like 2 or 3?
I don't know. Well,
So
you're good at that. How do I summarize that?
focus on your team.
Yeah. Okay. Focus on your inner circle, make them a priority, because if you guys are all thriving together, your business is going to thrive.
What's the third?
And
Oh, sorry, I cut you short.
no, it's okay. The third one, I would say, really take a look at the life that you want for yourself, and then create that. Just like I realized, like, I don't want to work in my business 24/7, and I love what I do. So if you were to ask my kids, like, I still do that, but I say to myself, I'm gonna take a vacation. I'm gonna take off on Saturday and Sunday. I'm not gonna miss my kid's birthday. And it's possible. And the people that say to me, like, I'm so busy, I can't do that, you can do it. You just have to say, this is what I want, and this is how I'm gonna carve the time, and make that life that you want.
So summarizing this, focus on your community, focus on your team and empowering your team and letting them do what they do best, and then create the life that you can envision. Whatever that is, make it happen. I've loved this conversation, Danielle. You've been incredible. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. That's how I find my future guests. Who's one person or two people you respect and admire and believe would make a great guest mentor like you've made for me today?
I didn't know you were going to ask that question. And I would have to say, Von Dugan with Kapow Noodle Bar. He has been amazing. He's actually my partner on Ground Zero, and has just taught me so much about everything we talked about. I mean, he is just an amazing leader. He is a people person. He's great with people, and he understands, the systems. And he's so bright from a marketing standpoint. So I would say that your conversation with him would just be so dynamic.
Beautiful. And Vaughn has already been introduced to me, so we're going to make that happen, and I cannot wait.
Yeah.
It's scheduled for a week from now. So you'll be
nice.
You'll be hearing from Vaughn shortly. And how can we connect? If we have questions, maybe about the boot camp, maybe we want to come join your team because we've just been inspired by you. What's the best way to connect?
Yeah. So my email is Danielle@oceans234.com. Best way to reach me. I always respond on my emails. That's it.
Love it. And again, if you're interested in that boot camp, don't forget, don't stop. DONTSTOP for half off. And thank you very much for that generosity in paying it forward and helping me out. I appreciate that. There is no question, Danielle, you are unstoppable.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please help us out. You can do it by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon. It really helps out. And don't forget, there's a complete archive of every episode with show notes at restaurantunstoppable.com.